Hello out there, and welcome to the No Shit Cast. I'm your host, Matt Frazier. Ooh, got a big old fun sack of stuff set up for us to talk about tonight. Joining me on the show, as usual, my co-host for this evening's activities will be none other than the great wizard of historical knowledge himself, Mr. Eric Smith. How are we tonight, Mr. Smith?
I'm doing well, sir. I'm not sure how I'm doing it, but I am doing well.
Setting up and taking in nutrition, right? You're All right, so I got a question for you.
Yes.
Is cereal really soup?
It is not soup.
It's not soup?
No.
Why?
Well, because I got to think about this.
That was my point, man.
Because it requires only milk.
There's a debate here. Okay, there's a debate. Is it soup? My thought first was it has to be hot to be soup.
Yeah, but gazpacho was.
That's right. We have exceptions, don't we?
Yeah,
and
and
things that people want to know about, man.
sugar is in a lot of that stuff too. A lot of tomato soup, there's sugar in it.
Sure. Yeah.
But I don't know, man. Like a cereal, it generally only requires milk, although it could be like with water.
I suppose.
Yeah.
I've made it, full disclosure, with coffee creamer before.
Well, I mean, it's mostly milk.
I was like, I mean, fucking milk. Ah, screw it. So I had French vanilla Cheerios before.
Oh.
That's been a thing.
Jeez, I'm surprised that's something you can't buy in the store.
Oh, so our buddy Mike Barnett, my old Navy buddy and guy that's been on the show before, the martial arts guy, has just told me that he's going to be in an independent movie, and they're starting filming on that very soon, and it's about like people with disabilities. Actually, it stars people with disabilities, and he's going to be in it because he's actually he has like a degenerative thing where he's been losing his eyesight.
Mm-hmm.
So basically slowly going blind. Like he walks with a cane now and stuff. So he's going to be in this movie. So it's really cool, really interesting.
Neat.
So we wanted to give him a shout out.
Yeah.
The movie is going to be called Making Sense. It's going to be an independent film, but it's full production. Like they've had table reads and the whole 9 yards on it. So and there's been articles on it. So I shared an article about that actually on the No Shit Cast Facebook page. So if you're interested in checking that out or going to see an interview with the director, I think she's the director. I'm pretty sure she's the director that she did with a local news station is really, really cool. So we'll be keeping you up to date on that as that comes out. And yeah, I'm going to have like a fucking actor on the show here soon. Man. Talk about being a movie actor. He's a kind of a really interesting guy, Mike, because I mean, when we did the show, we talked mostly about martial arts. At the time, he was taking Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and so was I. So he was kind of, we were like comparing notes because he was taking mostly gi classes, and I was doing no gi. And but he does like improv. He does improv acting and different things as well. And so he's got sort of a performance background.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
So it's really kind of neat that he's been able to land this part, and he's going to be in this really interesting movie. So I can't wait to see his face on the TV screen,
man,
or the movie screen, as it were. But anyway, congrats out there to Mike. We'll move on from that. I've got some articles here, Mr. Smith. Are you tingling with excitement?
I'm okay. I'm ready.
You're just okay?
I'm okay.
You better be excited, man.
I'm so excited.
I spent literally minutes pulling this together for us to talk about tonight. So slaving over a iPad.
You did contact me pretty early this morning.
Without my blue light glasses on. Yeah, I know. I was like, hey, man, we're recording, right? This one comes from the register.uk. SpaceX didn't move satellite out of impending space smash because it didn't see ESA's messages. So we talked about this in the last show, right? Where we were like, Elon's just such a baller. He's like, no, you fucking move, right? No, it's worse. They didn't get the email, or someone didn't send it to the right place. I don't know. It was a bug, I tell you, a bug. Elon Musk's SpaceX has claimed that a mysterious comms bug was what stopped it from moving its satellites away from an orbital collision course. The European Space Agency carried out a collision avoidance maneuver earlier this week when it realized one of its satellites was on course to potentially bump into a flock of SpaceX birds, as we reported previously. SpaceX's Starlink constellation, specifically Starlink 44 and the ESA's ALUS, I don't think we ever figured out how to say that, Earth observation satellite, were separated from their impending meeting around a half an orbit before it was likely to take place. What wasn't clear, however, was why SpaceX didn't take any action to shift its own satellites away from doom. And now they've piped up to say why. Quote, "It isn't because Elon Musk is a baller." Our Starlink team last exchanged an email with the Alias operations team on August 28th when the probability of collision was only in the 2 to the 2.2 e to the fifth range, to the fifth power, or 1 in 5 or 50,000, well below the 1 in e to the fourth or 1 in 10,000 industry standard threshold, and 75 times lower than the final estimate. SpaceX told the Register, at that point, both SpaceX and ESA determined a maneuver was not necessary. So far, so good. But then, quote, the U.S. Air Force's updates showed the probability increased from 1.6 to 1.69 e to the third, or more than 1 in 10,000. But a bug in our on-call paging system prevented the Starlink operator from seeing the follow-on correspondence on this probability increase.
I mean, it seems unlikely. Given their technological supremacy that we've observed.
Isn't that kind of like, oh, I didn't get the message? It's like a weird version of...
Yeah, it's kind of weird. You'd think
okay, wait a minute. You're putting communication satellites in space, Mr. Musk.
And computers and brains. And
if they don't communicate, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Right?
But they didn't get the message.
They don't communicate. There's a bug in the system. And that's what drove ESA to start issuing statements calling for an automated risk estimation and mitigation initiative, although SpaceX is still investigating the issue and will implement corrective actions, end quote. It has claimed that if it saw ESA's presumably increasingly frantic messages, it would have acted on them.
Oh my God, you guys. Is it too hard for them to just send somebody over? Some official make a stop there, like a little pit stop, and somebody in the area maybe that's in the military say, hey, these guys are trying to get a hold of you, and here's the issue. I mean, we got cell phones, right? Like, why couldn't you just, send somebody with a cell phone, like, here, call me when you get there, find someone in charge, let me talk to them. Maybe they can make them a little autonomous so that they can do minor course adjustments to avoid each other or something.
Well, we have aircraft has collision avoidance systems
something like that.
But they're more like alarms. And it tells you, hey, you're getting close. Hey, you're getting closer. Hey, get the fuck out of the way. It's like bang, bang, bang. It's like 3 levels. How do we get on that side? Anyway, Starlink is planned to grow to become a 12,000 strong fleet within the next 9 months. Terrestrial forms of transport have long dealt with what to do when you're about to crash into someone else's problem. At sea, the international regulations of preventing collisions say turn right, and if you're running head on into someone else, aircraft must also turn right if they are in an imminent collision situation. Okay?
Yeah.
As for space, it evidently take a few years for people to agree on what to do when expensive and delicate items whizzing around in orbit start coming closer and closer together.
Yeah. As you're reading that, I'm thinking, I guess they got choices of up and down too.
Well, it's definitely three-dimensional.
A lot longer.
Yeah. Yeah, what does right mean in perspective to
right?
what? Yeah, in relationship to what? Yeah, left and right is based on there being a horizon of some sort, right?
Right, yeah, some kind of a reference point. Hopefully they have some way of doing that.
We're always talking about the privacy bent shit, so I thought this one would be kind of interesting. This is from Inc.com, INC.com. It says, remember the 7-year-old who made $22 million on YouTube? Here's how that worked out for YouTube. I've written about Ryan's Toy Review, which is now described as a children's brand that first got its start on YouTube. So have you ever seen this? This little kid does he gets toys and then he talks about whether they suck or not. See?
Interesting.
Okay. So it became like this great big thing on the internet, on YouTube. So it's cute. So if you have kids or you've read my column before, you might know about how Ryan Kaji, the 7-year-old star of Ryan's Toy Review on YouTube, who earns $22 million a year because of YouTube. It makes him and his parents the top and highest paid influencers on and all of YouTube. He's like the king shit, man. Okay. Now, however, it's also enough to turn him into YouTube's biggest headache. The reason? Ryan's Toy Review is being held up now as Exhibit A, suggesting that YouTube is violating federal law by collecting private information on users under the age of 13. Here's where it gets weird. Senator Edward Markey of Massachusetts, Ed Markey, who was the author of the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or the COPPA, when he was in the White House, asked the Federal Trade Commission this week to look into extensive evidence that YouTube is violating child users' privacy and to hold YouTube accountable. So here's how it all comes together, according to Markey. COPPA prohibits websites from collecting data from users under the age of 13. YouTube claims that it's not a website intended for children, so it doesn't have to worry about COPPA. Okay, all good. Okay. But as Markey points out, Ryan's Toy Review is the top channel, and with 19 million subscribers, it explicitly characterizes itself as toy reviews for kids by a kid. Makes sense, right? Moreover, Ryan's Toy Review is just the most successful of a wide range of kids' channels, which have millions of subscriptions and views and are already directed towards children. So here's what the senator wants the Federal Trade Commission to do beyond just fining YouTube. Require Google to stop collecting any data from users under 13 and delete any data it already has. Force it to come up with a way to identify under 13-year-old users.
Not sure how that would work.
Right? Prohibit targeted marketing and influencer marketing on YouTube Kids. Make Google undergo an annual COPPA audit.
That should be fun.
What the fuck? That sounds like a prostate exam.
Yeah.
Prohibit Google from launching any new service aimed at kids without an FTC-appointed board's review.
Ouch, that's a clamp down.
Make Google run a campaign about how nobody under 13 should use YouTube and set up a fund to produce and amplify non-commercial quality content for children.
Wow.
Okay. So why does the age of 13 make a difference?
The only thing I know is that has that as an age limit is like PG-13. Like movies.
Well, no, all
games,
terms of
right?
service agreements that I know of on everything from Facebook to YouTube to everything has a TOS requirement that the user or the account holder be at least 13 years old.
Could be a holdover from...
Well, I think it's this. I think this was passed, so that got incorporated into their TOS agreement. They basically, then they can go back and say, hey, it's part of, you agree that you're over the age of 13, right? When you sign up for Facebook. Why is it 13? Why isn't it 18? Well, why is there a requirement period? Like, what? Why 13? It's a weird number. And I never understood that, but I think it's because of this law that they've passed. Like, my kids weren't allowed to have social media accounts until they were 13. None of them. And it wasn't because, well, it was because we didn't fucking want them to have them, you know, partially. I'll firmly agree to that. But our easy scapegoat for that when they were like 9 was, nope, the rules for Facebook say you have to be 13, so you can't have Facebook. So they didn't get social media accounts until they were 13. But I never understood that. I was like, well, if you're going to have an age restriction, why is it 13? What's so special about the age of 13? Well, apparently some law was written here partially, and that's why that is.
But why did they write it at that age?
Yeah, and why is that data different than the data of someone that's 18?
Yeah.
You see where I'm going with this? Like, we've talked about this several times, that if data rights are a thing, then social media is going to have to radically change. Right? I've said that. Like, okay, so if you're going to have rights to your data, then social media necessarily is going to have to change radically to compensate for that.
Right.
Well, here's a case where what we're saying is that there's if anybody under the age of 13 has some very specific federally mandated data rights. Okay, that exists today, right? Mm-hmm. And it's wreaking fucking havoc on YouTube now.
Yes.
Like, this has crept up and really...
If that happens, it's going to wreak havoc on them. If they
if they find them guilty of these things that he's talking about.
Yeah.
Now, some of this shit's weird for me because it's like, why are we saying that only 13-year-olds and under don't suddenly have a constitutional right to free speech? Right? I thought it was 18-year-olds was the age of adult, like in consent, and I think that that's weird too. Basically, they're saying that, you know, kids can't talk on the internet and you can't collect their data. I think that's the way I'm reading that. Maybe I'm wrong. Did you hear it that way, or?
Yeah, pretty much. They're not allowed to have any sort of data collection or be on there in a way that would give that away.
Moreover, Ryan's Toy Review is just the most successful of a wide range of kids channels, which have millions of subscriptions and views and are clearly directed towards children. Let's see. He wants to require Google to... Oh, we already talked about that, right? Yeah, okay. I wrote recently about a report of that YouTube has been considering two big changes when it comes to kids. Number one is moving all children's content from YouTube into its completely separate walled app, YouTube Kids. And two, disabling the autoplay feature on children's content so kids aren't subjected to an endless stream of videos. So it's like YouTube Zombie, right? You just set your kid in front of an iPad, plug it in, and hit play.
A walled garden for the kids.
God, could you imagine the algorithms taking them down what kind of wormholes? After that report, it became clear that the FTC has already been investigating YouTube for alleged COPPA violations, according to the Washington Post. So perhaps some of the enforcement action Markey is calling for is already underway and potentially having some effects. Now Markey is a Democrat, so he would normally seem to have a lot of power currently, given that Republicans control the Senate, except for two things. First, he recently teamed up with a Republican Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri to update the law and make it even harder for internet companies to track children. And second, we're talking about children. Nobody in Congress wants to be on the wrong side of issues about protecting kids. Bottom line, if you were running YouTube, I'd want to get out ahead of this. And if I were running Ryan's Toy Review, I'd start thinking about a home besides YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So this is what I'm saying. So what we've seen now and why it's jumped out at me is this is a delineation.
Mm-hmm.
This is saying that human beings under the age of 13 have very explicit data privacy rights. Well, why only 13? Why shouldn't everybody explicitly have very protective and very specific data rights?
Yeah.
So if we can do it so don't tell us we can't do that, because we're fucking doing it. We're just doing it for 13-year-olds and under right now, and there could be prosecution behind it. So it can be done, right?
I'm interested to see how it works out, because I think largely whether or not it can be done is going to be borne out on this, because this is the first real big entity that this law and idea has come into conflict with. The behemoth is
about to come to court, right?
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see what happens and how this plays out, because I think it will definitely set a precedence for how that's going to manifest itself and how much longer it's going to take. If this works, it'll take a lot less longer.
Dude, this is a thread that none of these companies want anybody to start pulling, which is kind of fucked up, because we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on all these platforms, and I talk about this stuff all the time. So if there was like a grand conspiracy to I guess smash free speech, I'm talking about them a lot, and they have never pulled any of my shit down.
Yeah,
right? Ever.
Yeah.
But I think once they start pulling on this thread, the stuff that's going to come out is going to be so damning and so intrusive and so alarming to people. It's going to be like it's going to be so confusing. People are just going to ignore it completely. Or like what I've seen today is a really good friend of mine basically put up a post on Facebook that because of some of the shit that has been coming out recently that Zuckerberg and company have been doing over at Facebook, he's leaving Facebook entirely, right? Now, you hear this shit all the time. I'm fed up with Facebook. That's not this dude. Like, this is a different kind of guy. And he's not someone that uses Facebook as a megaphone much anyway. So I don't think it's going to be a big loss for him or whatever. But I think there comes a tipping point where once you get to know enough, it's like that creepy boyfriend syndrome. It's like, yeah, but we still go out to the club and stuff. It's like, no, man, this guy's filming you.
Yeah.
Like, all the time, like weird shit kind of thing.
Well, be interesting to see
how it works out.
Yeah, man.
I'm just saying, man. I love that soapbox.
Yeah. It's a good point, man. It's a really good point.
Not to be pedantic.
No, but what we're doing like willingly as adults. So I don't know why they would ever.
Oh, there's a contract. I have a contract. Like there's contracts involved in what I do, right? Mm-hmm. There's a contract with my podcast provider. There's money exchanged. there's like I have all kinds of legal rights that way because of contract law and the way that all works, right? Mm-hmm. But anybody can just go throw a YouTube channel up, have an email account. You're good to go. You know what I mean? And that's the people that the way I'm interpreting this is the most vulnerable. So that's the way that the law is sort of written now to protect the most. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I shouldn't keep asking you if you know what I mean. If you don't know what I mean, then I should stop talking about it.
No, I'm just thinking about it. I'm just considering the implications mostly.
It's huge. It could literally change everything about the way we see and interact with each other on the internet.
Yeah.
Ultimately. It could have enormous ramifications. Like how many times you type in someone's name in Google?
Mm-hmm.
You've done that. Everybody does it. It's kind of a way. Is this dude, a serial killer? Is this chick been in prison? Whatever. You're out there looking around, and you get all this like public information about people.
Yeah.
They call it white paper data, but it's like a lot more than just white papers data or white pages data. White pages was a phone, a name, and a number.
Right.
End of, and an address.
You can build a profile on what you can find on the internet.
And then if you want to spend just a little bit of money, I guess $15, you can get full background searches and stuff on people.
Yeah.
It's not much, 15 to 25.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that gets a little creepy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but the fact that background
does all of that
checks
disappear too? Does all of this have to go away? Go behind some sort of...
Well, I don't know how they would do it with the courts. They'll still be able to do background checks and things, I think, employers and things like that.
Well, don't they need to be able to do that, or do they?
I don't know. That's kind of where we're...
I mean, this trips into some weird Fourth Amendment shit,
sure.
Right? With right to privacy and your personal possessions. Well, is your data your personal possession? And if it is, then everybody who's got it is breaking the law because they've taken it from you without your permission.
You go all the way to some philosophical John Locke stuff.
Oh, bro. It's going deep in the well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's worse.
Rousseau and Locke.
Dude, there's an argument for this concept of unjust enrichment here. Okay? If you're making money off of my data, off of something that's me, uniquely mine, mm-hmm. If you're making money on it and you're not off of it and you're not telling me about it, there's already laws against that shit. Like, I can't go to work for a company and then take their equipment and go out and do side jobs and make money on it and not expect them to, and if they sue me, thure. They're going to win.
And I've seen that happen.
They deserve a percentage of that at the very least.
I've seen that happen with several artists and a few authors where where they'll see somebody's using one of their pieces and they don't know who they are and they're making money off of it, or they're using verbatim stuff that they had written for someone else, in another publication, things like that. Like you do see that crop up every so often.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of common
comedians deal with this quite a bit.
Oh yeah. And people taking music, like copying music, that's really prolific in the sense that's your personal data, and you're maybe selling it, but you're not looking to be ripped off from it for somebody else to make the profit of hearing it without paying for it if you're trying to sell it.
It's a weird conundrum in a lot of ways, man, because you either have a right to your own personal effects and things like that, or you don't. And this is very quickly and rapidly running down that John Locke level constitutional argument.
Where you have to define what exactly is personal property and what makes that material property your property.
Right.
Is it the work that you put into it, or is it some other factor that can be identified? And in a world where there's a lot of virtual stuff, that might be more difficult to identify as something that you put work into or have manufactured or made or claimed.
Or what percentage of it you're entitled to based on, like with these deep fake shit. Like if someone goes out and films an action movie, then replaces the actor who did everything with the face of somebody like Brad Pitt, of me. But I didn't do any of that stuff. Right. It's just my face that superimposed on there.
What do they owe you?
Right. Who decides that?
Yeah. How you recompensate for what is intrinsically yours.
This is freaking bizarre shit now, man. Right.
And it used to be just ideas, but now it's
so much more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Intimate details.
Yeah. And likenesses, intimate details. They could do a profile on you, use your likeness, use deep fake, and have you doing something that looked like highly probable, but that you didn't do.
That you just didn't do at all.
Yeah.
So you can't even, that's what I meant. Like you can't even, we were talking about this before, you can't even trust video anymore necessarily. If you see video of somebody doing something, you can't necessarily believe that that's actually been filmed and that's what happened.
Yeah. I was talking with a friend about this at one point. I was saying how in almost every instance that you can imagine when you're discussing anything with anyone, you can never really truly prove your side of whatever it is. Even if your side is widely accepted by a group of people or the majority of the people, you yourself probably never had access to the data that you've researched and found.
That's right.
And so you're still
taking the word of somebody else.
Yeah. And don't directly know.
That's right.
I mean, no matter what somebody says about the sun, nobody, neither one of the normally you don't have access to the satellites that were built, the engineers themselves, or was not yourself an engineer on that particular satellite or an interpreter of data, a particular statistical scientist. Yeah. I mean, not many people have access to that. And it goes with just about anything, really. I mean, anything that you're researching, politically and medically and scientifically, you just don't, you're really hoping that
everything
what you're reading
is a personal interpretation of somebody else's, somebody else's.
Yeah, and the best you can really get is peer review. Somebody who has this access to the same stuff and that has the same abilities that you have of interpreting that data and give whatever opinion they give.
Yeah, because it's fully fucking documented.
Right.
You can recreate it. If you can't, then it's not peer reviewable data, right? It has to be able to be recreated.
And now we're talking
by somebody
about
completely separately.
Living in a world where that sort of data can be so corrupted so easily, and they talked about the people at LIGO corrupting some data in the beginning. Yeah,
I've heard of this
gravity wave detector.
That's right.
Yeah, it was like preliminary work that was done that was released too soon, essentially, from what I understand. But still, there's a lot of that runs rampant. You just don't know. You can't always trust the data. So any argument that
you can't always trust the instrument that measured it, man. I mean,
right,
there's all kinds of trust.
But then you start heading into philosophical ground about reality and whether you can trust anything that's even if you subscribe to relativity.
Yeah, the derivative.
Can you really trust anything? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, in a relativistic universe, you only have your own idea of what's going on, which is relative to anyone else's idea. So
it's a great conversation that leads right into this next topic.
Oh, okay.
Scientists have finally discovered an explanation for the Loch Ness Monster through DNA samples.
An explanation for it? I'm pretty sure.
Hey, we just got done discussing what's reality.
Right.
This is from Unilad. Go ahead.
Did not somebody come forward and claim to have faked that famous
But maybe
shot?
They were faking the faking so that they could then be famous for faking.
That's certainly the best kind of faking that I can imagine.
Tell me it's not possible.
Yeah, no, I can't.
People are strange. Scientists have revealed the Loch Ness Monster could actually be a real creature in the form of a giant eel after a major DNA investigation of the Scottish lake.
Okay.
After centuries of various people claiming that they'd spotted the mysterious Nessie, researchers could now have found a biological explanation after taking hundreds of samples from the Highland Loch. Professor Neil Gemmell led a team which established a detailed list of all the creatures living in the waters by identifying tiny genetic remnants left in the water. So they took like the water and just
filtered out DNA and kind of took a look at it. Sounds like
everything kind of shit.
Kind of looks like that way.
This is possible because all the life living in the waters leave tiny fragments of DNA through their skin, scales, feathers, fur, feces, and urine, which in turn can identify them. Professor Gemmell spoke at a conference today where he explained they came across one type of DNA over and over in the 226-meter deep lake. Quote, "We found large amounts of eel DNA in the Loch Ness. Every single site we went to had eels. Okay. The sheer volume was a bit of a surprise. Is it possible there's a giant eel?" What the fuck?
Wait a minute. How did we come from lots of eels to a giant eel?
Well, here's the next word. Maybe.
Maybe.
Wait a minute. Back to the top. Scientists have finally discovered an explanation for Loch Ness Monster. Scroll down, scroll down, scroll down.
Maybe.
Maybe. Eric, the big words giveth.
Little words taketh away.
We don't know if the DNA is gigantic or just many small eels.
That's just ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Do we even want to keep going? Should we give Unilad the boo bird here and say, this is bullshit?
No, it's been entertaining. Go ahead.
Okay. It is possible there's a giant eel, maybe. Okay, they normally grow to 4 to 6 meters in length, and people say they're observing something much larger than that. From 250 water samples, the scientists gained 500 million DNA sequences, which they examined to determine the creatures living beneath the water. Gemmell, who hails from the University of Otago in New Zealand, added, quote, "There are eels, and there is a plausible way eels could grow bigger than normal. It's plausible there might be one or two that grow to extreme size. Maybe 50% more, maybe bigger than that. Our data doesn't reveal their size, but the sheer quantity of the material says that we can't discount the possibility that there may be giant eels in Loch Ness."
Well, 50% or more would be 10, maybe 12 meters, and definitely some of the things that they've described are even bigger than that. But I don't see the connection on why there would be any indication that there would be a giant eel beyond the idea that it's possible for there to exist a giant eel.
You know what creeps me out about shit like turtles and eels and different things is we always think we've found the biggest one, and then squids and octopuses, and then we find another one.
Yeah, but usually and like in the Mariana Trench or somewhere like really deep.
This place is 250 meters deep.
They said that there used to be a hypothesis that these were ancient dinosaurs that got trapped in there when the continents had shifted.
Yeah, I've heard that before too. Yeah. I think those
that
would
almost
show
sounds
up
more plausible than.
Well, those would show up on active sonar and shit.
Oh, I always heard that there was so much soot in the lake that they could never really get good readings. Maybe they need to do some LiDAR.
Below like a certain level. What is this, like an ancient descendant of some sort of hippopotamus or something that can just like hold its breath for 20 years?
I don't know.
We don't know. According to Gemmell, the video filmed by Gordon Holmes in 2007, which shows a 4-meter torpedo-like shape seemingly swimming on the loch surface, would appear to support the idea Nessie could be, in fact, a giant eel.
4 meters, that's like 4 meters is under.
It's 12 feet.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that big.
Yeah. Divers have claimed that they have seen eels that are as thick as their legs in the loch. That's a big freaking eel.
That would be big, yeah.
Whether they're exaggerating or not, I don't know, but there is a possibility that there are very large eels present in the loch. Whether they are as big around as 4 meters, as some of these sightings suggest, well, as a geneticist, I think about mutations and natural variation a lot, and while an eel like that big would be well outside the normal range, it seems not impossible that something could grow to such an unusual size.
Seems not possible, huh?
Unusual.
Not impossible.
He says seems
not impossible.
Not impossible. Yeah. So he's saying it seems possible is what he's saying.
Yeah.
More than 1,000 sightings of the Loch Ness Monster have been reported since the Inverness Courier wrote about the mystical creature in 1933. We're still talking about this thing.
Yeah. And
that looks fake as hell.
Sure
that looks
does.
like someone airbrushed a weird looking thing on the water.
It sure does.
Like in Microsoft Paint.
There's a straight tail coming up, too.
Bizarre. Okay, so big news from Inc.com and from Apple. Ooh. Ready to hear about the next thing it's going to possess everybody?
Yeah, man.
The most incredible gadget Apple plans to introduce this fall is something you never saw coming, and here's why it's brilliant. You're going to have one of these, Mr. Smith.
Man.
This ain't going to be the watch, man. I'm telling you, you're going to want this. Among other products that the company is expected to announce this fall, this one is totally unexpected. Fall is finally here. Kids are back to school, and soon the leaves will start to change for some people. But first, there's a much more important matters to attend to. That's because fall means that new gadgets from Apple. The company has already sent out invitations to its launch event next week, where in addition to the latest iPhones and iPads, along with the new iOS software, there's one thing Apple appears ready to announce that you probably weren't expecting to see. At least that's according to a report from Mac Rumors that says it discovered references to Apple's long-rumored augmented reality glasses project.
Oh, no, I think it will make me ill.
Oh, no, this isn't what you think it is.
Okay.
So it's actually not that crazy. Tim Cook is already on the record as saying that AR is one of the most important frontiers that Apple plans to conquer moving forward. It's already a big part of the game of gaming. It's been added to Maps in iOS 13 and a variety of third-party apps, including ones from IKEA and American Airlines, have used Apple's AR kit to take advantage of the technology. But glasses? I feel like we haven't exactly seen anyone prove that this is a thing people actually want. Google Glass, for example, still exists, but you can't buy them. Google doesn't sell them to customers anymore, which is fine because at $1,500 a pop, no one was really buying them anyway. Of course, if anyone can find a way to do glasses right, I'm comfortable putting my money on Apple. The company knows how to make hardware, something Google has never exactly excelled at, and its focus on creating incredible user experiences is good for developing a technology that's literally all about user experience. We know all this shit, blah, blah, blah. It would be a win for AR and the company's belief that if this has real value to our ordinary lives, unlike virtual reality where users are transported to a completely artificial representation. Okay, that's what you're talking about that makes you sick. Mm-hmm. Okay, augmented reality serves to augment the information we receive about the actual world around us. Okay, a device that provides immediate visual feedback is far more useful than having to look down on your phone or open an app. So think of this thing as like a heads-up display for the world.
Okay.
That's more what they're talking about here. And Google tried it, but it was too heavy. It was weird. People didn't like it because it recorded them when you were looking at them and shit. It recorded their faces. There was all this stuff about it that became very intrusive and things. Well, yeah, because it has to know what it's looking at to give you digital feedback on what you're looking at, right? So you know how Google has this thing where you can take a picture or something and then you can actually upload the picture and then have them tell you what is this?
Yeah.
And it'll give you the best match that it can find, right? So they just kind of mapped that also into their virtual or their augmented reality stuff. So if you were walking down the street and you looked over and saw the sign for McDonald's, it would say McDonald's. And then it would go, here's buy 2 Big Macs, get 1 free coupon from McDonald's if you use this code. You know, that's the idea of having your reality augmented, is that you get more data from the natural stimuli that's around you, but something has to record that for that to happen. So everybody you're looking at, every place you go that you're wearing these, every conversation you have with people is being listened to and recorded and looked at by you got
to trust those algorithms.
Yeah, by algorithms, by AI, artificial intelligence.
Yeah, you got to trust them. They'll give you what you want.
This is the first steps into becoming transhuman.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the first steps for sure.
I mean, I think that ultimately the like Bluetooth headsets and stuff like that connected us to our phones and the Apple Watches are also sort of in this same vein of moving us
and
towards
like
transhumanism.
RFID type technology and stuff like that to interact with the glasses. Yeah. That'd be cool.
Yeah, because there's going to come a point where if you have this thing embedded in your hand, here, let's get all. Let's talk about Satan for a little bit and the mark of the beast. And so you have this mark of the beast implanted in your hand, right? But let's say it's like you said, it's an RFID device. Then subsequently, you could hard code all of your electronic devices to that RFID.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, be very simple. So there would be no need if someone could steal your shit, it won't work.
Right.
Okay, once it's hard coded, once that PROM is burnt, so to speak, to say this is the code that you work with, if you're out of proximity, it doesn't work.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's all these kind of real world benefits to this shit, but it's going to drive people nuts.
Yeah, well.
When you start talking about embedding identification systems like we already do with our pets, and some people volunteer to have this done now too. Mm-hmm. And that there's going to become a benefit to having that.
That's not going to go over well with the Christian folk.
At all. It's going to be a problem.
Yes, it will.
Woo! Anyway. Yeah, so I figured you'd get a kick out of that, man. All right, so this one comes from BusinessInsider.com. A new solar-powered device can turn salt water into clean drinking water and produce electricity at the same time.
Huh, yeah, well, I've been seeing a lot of that desalination stuff.
It's a huge problem, man, because the availability of quality drinking water for a large percentage of the population of the planet is an issue.
Didn't Kevin Costner invent some desalination devices as well?
I wouldn't doubt it. The best one I've actually seen is from Dean Kamen, the guy that invented the Segway. They've got one that uses about as much electricity as a hairdryer, which isn't much. And it actually pumps, I think it was something like 5 liters per minute. And you can literally take the inlet hose of this thing and throw it into a sewer pit. And it will give you, it gives you pharmaceutical grade injectable water out the other end. This guy's have you ever studied him much? Dean Kamen? See, I worked for a company right in Manchester, New Hampshire for years. And Dean Kamen and Deca Research and where they make the Segways and all that's right. It's right in the Mill District downtown. So I mean, it's like right there. And you could like go over, and he's really big into this thing called like First Robotics, where he tries to get kids more into the STEM sort of.
That's cool.
So they have these robot competitions where people have to build robots, or teams build these robots that solve problems. Like put this in the basket, and you have to. Anyway, it's really interesting shit. It's not like BattleBots, which I find far more interesting, by the way. Robots beating the shit out of each other. But anyway, he's one of those guys that says, what's the problem? Let's fix the problem. You know what I mean? And he takes on sort of these big, and that's where the Segway was sort of born from too, was finding a way that people could mass transit in really super overcrowded cities where eventually cars are going to become a problem kind of thing. And that's what I mean. He's like super forward thinking. Now they deliver the mail in Manchester, New Hampshire with Segways in the winter, in a place where it snows like feet per year. They have like big knobby tires and shit on them. And you just see them going down the road, man. It's pretty wild. It's a male person. But anyway, he has a system that uses very little electricity and has a filtering and it's really neat. No, it doesn't have any consumable parts. And he teamed up to get these into remote places of the world. And this is the most remarkable thing about this, was he teamed up with Coca-Cola. He had to find a way to get these. So he built these things, and he found ways to get money, philanthropic money, philanthropy. Okay, he found ways to get people to invest heavily in these things, millions of dollars to build them and make them so that they could get them to these remote regions and stuff where people, are having problems getting access to water. Like people are fucking dying all over the world because they can't get to clean water, and they live beside oceans and shit. It's bizarre, right? And so he went to the government, and the government couldn't help him either. Like he went to governments, and nobody could help him. Like it's like how. So when you really get down to where the rubber meets the road, and he's like, I have a solution. We can fix this. Let's get it to these people.
Yeah.
No one fucking knows how to get it there. No one can get it there. So he ended up teaming up with Coca-Cola because Coca-Cola has a better distribution network around the world and into more places like this than any government, than any nonprofit organization, than any charity in the world. So now Coca-Cola, so these things are painted like Coca-Cola booths. They just use it as advertising and stuff, but they just drop them in these places. You can actually power them from batteries. You can power them from solar panels, and they make water. They take water that's completely undrinkable, pretty much no matter what's in it at all, and makes it drinkable, and they use it, and it's like saving people's lives and stuff. But what was remarkable to me, with all of the money that gets spent for charities and all this stuff, when he actually had a solution and had to get it out to people so that it would actually start saving lives, nobody could fucking help him. They're big, I mean, they're big.
Logistics.
They're the size of like a family chest freezer, kind of big. Okay. So so what does Coca-Cola move into places like this? It's about the same size. Soda machines.
Yeah.
So they're used to moving this kind of material around. So they just like plopped it into their distribution network. Boom. They started shipping this shit out.
Wow. That's neat.
I don't know why I went down that wormhole, but I hope it was educational.
It was really interesting.
Let's see. The world needs both electricity and clean water, but producing one of these resources can deplete the other. Remember, I talk about this all the time. Like, if you want water, you need lots of power, cheap.
Yeah.
Because it takes heat to get them to separate. In the U.S., public water systems account for around 6% of the nation's electricity consumption. Big fucking deal, right? Since purifying water and distributing it to local water systems requires energy. On the reverse side, the nation's thermoelectric power plants withdraw up to 170 billion gallons of fresh water each day from rivers, lakes, streams, and aquifers. Up to 6 billion gallons of that water is consumed, meaning it doesn't return to the environment. Producing the solar power via panels requires about 300 times fewer gallons of water than the thermoelectric power plant, but it can be more costly and doesn't generate as much electricity. However, a team of researchers in Saudi Arabia have come up with a device that they say could transform an electricity plant from a water consumer to a freshwater producer. And they're marrying two technologies together here. Okay. Last month, the researchers published a paper describing this new solar technology, which can simultaneously desalinate water and produce electricity.
That's great.
Okay. The researchers' new device is just a prototype for now, but they envision it as a way to desalinate and purify water in places where fresh water is scarce or contaminated. That includes hundreds of thousands of sites across the United States. To build the prototype, the researchers installed a water distiller on the back of the solar cell. So they just married them together.
That's interesting.
Okay. When in sunlight, the cell produces electricity and releases heat like a typical solar panel, but instead of sending the heat back into the atmosphere, the device directs it to the distiller and creates distillation. Okay. Which uses the heat as an energy source to power the desalinization process. Isn't that nuts?
It's crazy. It's nice to know that
I mean, what mad genius came up with this fucking idea, right? Oh, yeah, they named him, right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because the first thing I thought was that it's great that it was...
Well, how omnipresent a problem is that for that nation?
Well, not just that, but forever. Like, Arabs are also the ones that invented the baptism rituals because of how...
precious water is.
Yeah, and a lot of rituals concerning water and the purification of water or the purification of people through water. So it's really nice to know that in 2019, there's an Arab that's purifying water still in a scientific way and for the betterment of man, just as it was in ancient times.
Yeah, it seems like it's like that saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
Is that any truer in this situation
right.
for this person? To test the quality of the water that comes out, the researchers fed salt water and water containing heavy metals like lead, copper, and magnesium into the distiller. The device turned the water into vapor. Okay, it's a vaporization process, which then passed through a plastic membrane that filtered out salt and contaminants. The result was clean drinking water that met the World Health Organization's safety standards.
Wow.
That's crazy, right? I mean, think about how big a deal that is. So basically, you just need real estate. You just need a place to put it.
Right.
Okay, it powers itself. So once it's paid for, it's paid for.
Mm.
Now there may be some consumables, maybe like that plastic membrane or something,
or maintenance or upkeep.
maintenance, right? You got to clean the solar panels to keep their efficiency up. The researchers said the meter-wide prototype could produce around 1.7 liters of clean water every hour. The ideal location for it would be in an arid or semi-arid climate near a water source.
How many hours?
Every hour. 1.7 liters per hour per panel.
So basically like a 2-liter bottle of Coke or whatever.
Per hour.
Per hour.
Yeah.
Per panel.
Per panel. Yeah. You start stringing a bunch of them together, and now you're getting into something.
And that's just creating water out of any watery liquid pretty much that you got handy.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things you can't get out that, well, I don't know, man. I don't think.
Because if it vaporizes the water,
I do a lot
of microbes and stuff. They're getting heavy metals out. I don't know what much else could be in there that, aside from heavy metals and microbes.
I integrate a lot of reverse osmosis systems, and radioactivity.
Okay, well, yeah,
you can't get that out.
No.
Okay, that has to get consumed by like a biological creature that dies and then settles it to the bottom to like pull it out. That's what happens to it. Did you know that?
Yeah. I mean,
it gets sunk.
Yeah.
Things that poison the ocean get consumed and sunk to the bottom, and by the death of everything it kills. It's morbid as shit.
Yeah.
More than 2 billion people worldwide lack safe drinking water in their home, and the team behind this device isn't the only group working on solar-powered water production. The Arizona-based startup Zero Mass Water, for example, makes a panel that uses solar power to condense water out of the air and filter it. The Indian startup Uravu is also working on a modular device that condenses 15 to 20 liters of water from the air per day using solar energy. Yeah, this is like off the grid, really interesting shit, right?
Yeah, it is neat. Like it right out of the air.
The point is that it's not. We don't have a water problem. We have a desalinization problem. Like how many times have we talked about this?
Yeah,
right?
Not much longer.
Not well. Right.
We'll assuming we'll have to watch how this works out. Just like the court case.
Well, we've seen what's happened when it comes to when you offset a utility. People are really starting to struggle with being able to go off the grid. You know that, right? Like there are states that say you can be off the grid all you want, but you're going to stay connected to the power source, the utility.
Really?
Yep, because the argument that they make is that it's a safety thing. If your system fails, you still need power. So you have to pay a monthly access fee, even if you're not using it. You have to pay a monthly access fee and stay connected to their system. The reason for that is that they run these big-ass power lines, and it costs a lot of money to run power lines, okay? And they got to pay for that shit. They got to pay for the upkeep on that. Someone's got to go out there and cut trees down around this stuff. Someone's got to go out there and fix it when a car hits a telephone pole. There's all this maintenance and upkeep to the distribution of power. And so then these people were like, well, I'm just going to build a house, put solar panels on it, and disconnect. Fuck you, right? And the states are starting to side with the utility that says, doesn't matter. You own like a responsibility to the power line moving across the front of your house. Even if you're not connected to it, you have a responsibility to the upkeep and maintenance of that as a citizen, right? And it's like, wait a minute, this is a private company. It's like, well, not always. Some are public utilities for sure. Their own like I think the Tennessee Valley Authority, the TVA, and those are like public owned utilities, and they're their own sort of bureaucratic mess. But you can't just disconnect anymore. You can't. So I wonder, like I've seen how this has worked out, to the point where you can produce more electricity than you consume, and that's called regenning. And there's an expectation that you get to sell that back to the power company, and a lot of power companies don't like that shit either.
Yeah.
And then they're getting these state laws passed that say they don't have to buy it back from you. Okay, you can net meter, but you can't go past zero. If you send anything back, that's on you. You lose it. It's not so you can't run your meter backwards.
Right.
Or you can't make them start paying you. But technically, that's what you're doing if you have the right system.
Yeah.
So this is going to be one of them instances where I feel like there's going to come technology that's going to make the necessity to be connected to the public water utilities, just like with the public power utilities, and the power utilities is going to start becoming an issue.
Yeah.
So what happens if you're connected and you have a water system that sucks, the best drinking water or the most pure water in the world out of the air, and you're pumping it into your house, but you pump some extra into the public utility? How are they going to regulate that? Like, do you have to now be disconnected completely? Because you could send them contaminated water doing that shit. Like, there's all this weird, and it's the same thing with the power utilities. What's the quality of the power?
Yeah.
Is it noisy as hell and it's, blowing people's computers up? Or is it, and what happens if the grid goes down and utility workers are out there? Is your system going to shock the piss out of them? You know what I mean? There's like all these what if things. And I think this is going to be another one of those
I would agree.
new fields of, okay, now what does this mean if you could just do it yourself?
Yeah. Shit.
We're all going to get those modular reactors, man, and none of this is going to matter. You're never going to have to be connected to. The only thing that the state's going to do is pave our roads. We're going to make all of our own power. We're going to make all of our own drinking water. We're going to filter carbon monoxide out of the air to fuel our cars. It's crazy, right? Okay, so from International Business Times, did an asteroid hit Earth this week? Fireball explodes over New York and causes loud boom.
Well, if it exploded, it didn't really hit, did it?
That's a good point.
I'm just saying. I don't know. It might have just blown up and disintegrated.
Well, what did it hit?
It just boomed.
It hit the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Well, that's a hit.
Yeah.
Okay. Residents in Central New York reported hearing and seeing a large fireball streak across the sky on Monday. According to an astronomy organization, that fireball was caused by an asteroid or meteor that entered Earth's atmosphere. Mm-hmm. According to the nonprofit organization American Meteor Society. What? Several eyewitnesses from New York reported a fireball event on September 2nd at around 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Many of them reported seeing the fireball careen across the dark sky before hearing a loud booming sound, be it breaking the speed of sound, I would imagine, right?
It could also be it exploding, too. They will explode.
Like going hypercritical from temperature?
Yeah, like one side gets really hot, and I guess one side is not, and it just breaks up and sometimes explodes.
Well, if there's any kind of liquid inside of them, that would expand rapidly,
that too.
Right?
Yeah.
I was standing in the driveway facing north when the burning object passed above the trees from east to west. Oh, she told AMS. It lasted a second or so and had a trail behind it. A few minutes later, I heard a very loud boom. Maybe it hit the ocean. Around New York, it could have. Off Manhattan somewhere. Other eyewitnesses even said the booming sound was so loud that it caused their houses to shake. The AMS explained that there was a delay between the appearance of the fireball and the sound it produced because that sound travels much slower than light. This thing was hauling ass. The operations manager for AMS, Mike Haney, explained to CNN that what the eyewitnesses saw was the flash caused by a rock from space as it breached Earth's atmosphere. According to NASA, fireballs occur when a small asteroid or meteoroid enters Earth's atmosphere and gets heated up due to the atmospheric friction.
Blammo.
Quote, in front of it, a bow shock develops where atmospheric gases are compressed and heated, NASA explained. Some of this energy is radiated to the object, causing it to ablate, and in most cases break apart. Fragmentation increases the amount of atmospheric intercepted and so enhances ablation and atmospheric braking, the agency added. NASA also noted that due to their small size, asteroids and meteoroids that cause fireballs usually do not reach the ground. They don't make it.
Nope.
They usually explode shortly after going through Earth's atmosphere.
And they just dust down.
I imagine this happens all the time.
Yeah.
Like all
in places
the time.
where no one's there and looking and concentrated. I forget, but they've calculated how much material from space hits the planet. Like, there's constantly shit falling.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain minerals and stuff that's how this planet got them, right?
There's maybe there's that possibility. Yeah, like you mean like objects that's created by craters.
No, I mean like gold is here because it came from outer space. It didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't fall
right?
from outer space, but it got trapped in the accretion of the planet when it accreted into a planet. So one of the reasons why they think that gold or the planets accreted is because there's gold in it, right? Gold was like formed in the heart of a star that preceded our star, so really, really long time ago, like before 5 billion years, and it was just hanging out that whole time. It was still there, and then eventually, when the planets accreted, when the sun was being formed and the planets were being accreted around that same time, that gold was still there and accreted into those planets because it would have had to have been made prior to the planets. So that's one of the things that makes it look like the planets accreted together, because they trapped gold in there, and gold is definitely not indigenous. So it can't be some sort of a if you're going to say that it was created in some other way, like through energy or something like that, you'd also have to explain, well, how did gold get there? Because gold couldn't have been formed on our planet because it's too dense. It's a heavier element.
It has to be formed in a star or something like that, right?
Right. And in a star that preceded ours, because our planets were made shortly after our sun came into existence, right? It was the leftover material from that event that occurred. So, and our star formed because there was stars here before and exploded, made a nebula, and eventually seeded the area with heavier elements, which made our star, and then made some of its own heavy elements, and these all accrete into a planet.
Right.
Otherwise, how did the gold get here?
And then everything just kind of over time keeps smashing together, right, and forming a larger. So we're still taking on space debris, as it were. So the planet is gaining mass constantly.
Yeah.
That is nuts, because mass determines our distance from the sun, doesn't it? Through angular momentum.
Yeah. I mean, how fast we're going and stuff like that. Yeah, it does. But I think there's a lot more wiggle room in the orbits than there is to worry about the amount that's being added to the planet.
Yeah.
But definitely there's more coming to the planet than leaving it.
That's nuts. So gravity's increasing technically in a weird sort of way.
Yeah. That means time is slowing down.
Slowing down.
Yeah.
It sure feels that way, doesn't it?
Wow, how did we get on that? This is really far from what I think you're about to read to me.
Well, this article comes from Electrek. Lamborghini unveils supercar with supercapacitors.
See, I'm not surprised.
I've talked about supercaps.
Yeah.
Right? And it's the most powerful Lamborghini ever
and still
produced.
Not surprised. That all sounds very reasonable to me.
Lamborghini has its most powerful car ever produced, the Cheyenne. It's called the Cyan, S-I-A, with a little thingy over it in. And they did so by creating a novel hybrid powertrain with supercapacitors. Supercapacitors are unlike electrochemical batteries. They can charge and discharge in just seconds, but the drawback is that most of them have low energy density and can't store enough energy to be viable for a product like an electric car. Some companies have been exploring hybrid supercapacitors, which are sort of a mix of batteries and supercapacitors for potential use in electric vehicles. Lamborghini, who hasn't been quick to adopt electric technology, has been at the forefront of using supercaps in its supercars. Now the Cyan is the latest example of how the automaker is adopting the technology by being the world's first application of supercaps for hybridization. They described the system. Quote, the energy accumulation technology is a world first. Rather than a lithium-ion battery, the Cyan innovates supercapacitor applications, a technology pioneered originally in the Lamborghini Aventador but dramatically developed to store 10 times the power. It is 3 times more powerful than a battery of the same weight and 3 times lighter than a battery producing the same power.
Nice.
See why this is a big freaking deal?
Yeah, man, because more power, less weight.
Yeah.
That sounds great for a car.
That all translates into range or speed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The electric system with the supercapacitor and e-motor weighs only 34 kilograms.
Wow.
Thus, it delivers a remarkable weight-to-power ratio of 1 kilogram per horsepower. Symmetric power flow ensures the same efficiency in both charging and discharging cycles, the most lightweight and efficient hybrid solution. Combined with the V12 engine, the Cyan delivers a total of 819 horsepower and has a top speed of over 350 kilometers per hour. I don't know what that translates into miles per hour.
Fast.
Very fast. Stefano Domenicali, Automobili Lamborghini chairman and chief executive officer commented on the new vehicle. The Cyan is a masterpiece in possibilities. Not only does the Cyan deliver a formidable hypercar design and engineering tour de force today, it augments the potential for Lamborghini as a super sports car brand for tomorrow and for decades to come, even as hybridization becomes more desirable and inevitably essential. The Lamborghini Cyan represents the first step in Lamborghini's route to electrification and expedites our next-generation V12 engine. Its Cyan moniker, meaning flash or lightning, is Bolognese dialect, denotes the first electrification of a Lamborghini production car and confirms our strong connections to the territory in which we operate. With the Cyan, Automobile Lamborghini demonstrates its dynastic strength as a legendary super sports car brand for the future. So
I want one.
Dude, there's this thing called the Nuremberg Ring, and it's a place where they have F1 races. It's a huge racetrack in Germany. And so now for any sports car like this, it has to go to Nuremberg and go and run the Nuremberg Ring, and it has to set its lap time. So for any sports car of any of these exotics, Porsche came into the Nuremberg Ring with an exotic hybrid. They were the first ones and destroyed the records. And it set off a revolution in supercars now. And this technology is trickling down into... Eventually, it'll trickle down into our cars, But super caps, bro, it's going to be a big fucking deal because you can charge your electric vehicle in seconds. You just dump power into it. I don't. But instead of waiting at a gas, that's the problem with these cars. Is charging the batteries takes forever. Not these.
I think of the Nuremberg wood cutting. Wood carving.
What's that?
It's one of the things that people talk about when they talk about UFOs.
Okay.
Or mass hallucinations. There's a wood carving in like the 1500s called the Nuremberg wood carving.
Okay.
And it depicts all of these strange lights and shapes in the air. And it's supposed to be like UFO battles. I'm sure you could Google it and see a picture.
What do you think it? Because I know you're like
sun dogs. That's what I think that it is.
What's a sun dog?
Yes. Maybe you should Google that too. It's a meteorological
How fucking
phenomenon.
stupid am I tonight?
No, I'm just saying, like it's a meteorological phenomenon.
Okay, Nuremberg carving.
Yeah.
Looks like a big fish.
Wood carving.
Okay. I'm gonna get like some Germans' personal wood carvings. Oh, is it this thing?
Yeah.
That's a carving? It looks like a painting to me.
Yeah, well, they painted it, but it was originally carved in wood.
Okay.
And that was supposed to be a representation of what they saw. I believe that was in a newspaper.
Okay.
And that's what they were supposed to have seen.
It's totally a UFO battle. Some of the UFOs look like jacks. Some of them look like pillars on buildings. One of them looks like a giant arrow.
Yeah, right.
And there's a weird sun effigy looking thing in there.
It's pretty bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah.
But when you say Nuremberg, that's what I think of. I think of this
that
picture.
looks like a cannon. Those look like cannons of some sort with little openings and whatever. I would say that this is the direct result of somebody experimenting with LSD.
Maybe a whole group of people.
Or mushrooms or something.
Maybe ergot.
Why do you say a whole group of people?
Well, because multiple people were supposed to have seen this, and everybody was talking about it, and the newspapers were writing about it and stuff. And this is what appeared in the newspaper that was supposed to have been an eyewitness account by many different people. So I was thinking of ergot because that's a natural fungus that gives an LSD type experience when you have it, and it usually grows on things like wheat. If you let the wheat mildew and it gets ergot on it, you can have hallucinatory LSD trippy experiences. It could be something else. I don't know. I always think that it's sundogs, which is like the reflection of the sun that makes spheres and lines. There, like down. So there's a picture.
Yeah,
that's a sundog. That's one example. There's a lot of different ones, and they can make these spheres and arcs and crosses and all this other stuff that's kind of like what they were showing up there to some degree, at least in the most natural way, maybe, you know.
It's funny because for a lot of this stuff, the most plausible, because what I say, the most plausible explanation is generally the right one, right?
Yeah.
And we know simplest. That's what it is. Yeah. The most simplest. Okay. The most simplest. The simplest. Anyways, I mean, like I said, when I look at this, I go, dude was having a good time.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, my first impression of that is not that
UFOs
and then hearing that because I'm seeing all these like broken timber and all this other stuff that's in this, and you're saying it's some sort of mass hallucination where many people describe seeing this and seeing this exact same thing in the sky.
Yeah.
Then I don't know that psychedelics do mass hallucinations. That's something else.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Or it happened. So why can't you get on this was aliens, man. They had a war.
They do talk about this on Ancient Aliens.
Yeah, they do. And and doesn't the one of the Vedic texts that you love to talk about?
They talk about that. Yeah, I don't think they usually connect those things together because the Vedic texts are a lot older. This was like in the 1500s.
Sure, yeah.
But I mean, it's
the Vedic texts talk about that
Vimanas.
The Vimanas that was reproduced by some. Isn't that the one that the person?
There's a book they show on there that's written in Sanskrit, and it's supposed to be written by this monk in a time before there was.
But he's channeling.
Yeah, but it was actually a modern day guy channeling this other guy from the past. But when they talk about it, they just tell you it was this guy from the past that wrote the book.
So what's influencing what is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I don't
know.
He
sees this, okay, and then channels a Vedic text that says that it happened much earlier.
Well, no, I mean, this has nothing to do with that. I'm talking about another book and that they show on Ancient Aliens, but
I know. And so they talk about this specifically on Ancient Aliens too, I think. Right?
Yeah, both of them, yeah.
Okay, so what I'm getting at is the guy that did the channeling. Okay, I'm saying which influenced which. How do we know the guy that did the channeling had never seen this before? Because the guy that did the channeling was born after this happened.
Yes, yeah.
So he sees this, channels a monk that's seen it happen
before,
way long time ago. Okay. And then those people saw that and did this. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, man, I don't know. The forms are a lot different, but I don't know. That's just what comes to my head. When I hear Nuremberg, that's pretty much the first thing I think of is that silly wood carving.
There's I'm a gearhead, so Nuremberg is a real interesting place for me.
Yeah. I didn't know they had such a history with cars.
It's a big deal. Yeah. It's a track. I think the track it's really long. It's like 15 or it's like 7 or 8 miles. No, it's bigger than that. It's like 15 miles,
I think. A video game.
Oh, for sure. And it's got like 121 corners. I mean, it's just insane. And like F1 driver, people died, obviously, still do every year. But anybody, it's a weird place because on certain days, anybody with a vehicle can go and pay like $15. And they're like, go ahead.
That's cool.
And they just let you go, you know? And so there's tons of YouTube videos of people with different, you know, vehicles and stuff doing that. Some people go out there on like mopeds, you know, some people go out there on like super bikes. It's like, there's probably like a minimum speed limit. I'm making the moped shit up, but you see like everyday drivers is what I'm getting at.
Right. Yeah, that's neat.
People wrecking, totaling, like getting new cars who really don't know how to drive that fast and bouncing them off the guardrails and shit. BoingBoing.net sends us this article.
Boing, boing.
So this is Ring. You know who Ring is? The doorbell people it's like Ring doorbells?
Nope.
So they have these digital doorbells. Man, they have these digital doorbells. You put them on your door and you put an app on your phone. Someone comes up and rings the doorbell, turns the camera on and sends it to the app on your phone.
Oh, okay.
You look at it and then they can hear you through it. Now you could be at work.
Right.
You could be in the house. You could be, you know, whatever. And you can talk to people through this Ring doorbell. So it's a smart device.
Sure, okay.
So Ring, quote, we don't use facial recognition.
Okay.
Because your privacy is important to them. They're not going to record your face. Or they just use it to let you know somebody's there. But also Ring, quote, we have a head of facial recognition research.
This guy keeps us straight, though. He doesn't let us do any of that. He knows what it is.
That's right. He's just there to make sure we're not
right.
doing
Yeah,
this.
you guys don't do this.
One of the most obvious facts I've learned in covering the unfolding scandal of the secret deals between Amazon's Ring surveillance doorbell group and hundreds of U.S. police departments is that Amazon loves to play word games, and that's their emphasis on loves. For example, I've been repeatedly emailed by company spokespeople to tell me that cops only get access to Ring customers' videos if the customers offer to share it. But what they never said is that if a customer turns down a police request, Amazon instructs the cops to make a, quote, official request to the company, and then they grant warrantless access to the footage.
And then we're like, you know what? We don't give a fuck about what your personal privacy is. We'll just go ahead and give it to you guys.
This kind of deceptive practice really is business as usual for the company. Last week, the company tweeted at the ACLU to accuse them of posting something misleading when they said that Ring users' facial recognition with the footage it captures, and Ring's spokesperson, anonymous, as is inevitable with the case with Ring, whose spokespeople have had to be cajoled, pushed, and wheedled. What's that mean? Wheedled? To put their names to their original statements to the press, told BuzzFeed that, I don't know what the fuck that sentence was all about, but whatever. Quote, here's what the person said, quote, Ring is not recognition and does not work with recognition. Recognition is Amazon's creepy, low reliability facial recognition flagship product. Maybe that's true, but you know what's also true. There's a dude at Ring Ukraine named Oleksandr Obynikov, who's, boy, that sounds like a Bond villain, doesn't it?
It does, man.
Whose title is, quote, head of face recognition research 'em. And who has given conference talks on how facial recognition can integrate with products like Ring. The company's filed multiple facial recognition patents, and its terms of service allows it to use the video from the doorbell to train facial recognition systems. It's like you cannot get away from this shit. Oh, and they've recently advertised job openings for engineers with experience in facial recognition, but they don't do facial recognition, no. Eric.
This is just to keep, people from doing it. They need a team of experts there to know the difference.
Quote, that seems to belie the work being done at Ring Ukraine, which had a head of face recognition research as of the spring of last year. In March 28, the Bond villain identified himself using that title and published a presentation that showed how cameras could better identify street signs and employ alignment-free facial recognition. This March 2018 presentation slides from Ring Ukraine employee Oleksandr Obynikov identify him as the company's head of face recognition research. The following April, the Bond villain spoke at the Open Data Science Conference in Kiev, where he was billed as the leading face recognition department at Ring Ukraine. According to his LinkedIn profile, Obynikov is still employed at Ring Ukraine, working on, quote, computer vision problems. His profile makes no mention of the phrase facial recognition.
Could just visual problems for computers.
So you if you're like a postal worker, if you're a UPS worker, if you're, you deliver parcels for a living, you're getting shot how many times? You're getting your image captured how many times a day?
Plenty of times.
It's crazy.
I guess there's robots now too that's doing this. So
remind me, what are we talking about?
Well, remember there's we talked about the robots that were like this by Amazon that was delivering packages.
That's right. They were like little coolers, right? And then they had to have like people watching them.
So
shit. So
they're
people
sending
wouldn't
stuff
like tip
without
them
faces
over.
to the doors too. So they get the facial recognition, but they also have the faceless robots.
Yeah, who wins in that equation, right? the robot shows up and the Ring thing, which is also Amazon, goes, I know what you are. I sent you. It'll go up and it'll communicate with it through infrared or something to let it know exactly when it delivered the package.
Yeah.
And
they'll drop
like
it
all
off
kinds of data and shit. I've sampled the air and I smelled the marijuana. Call the police. This is from Unilad. Dave Chappelle's Netflix special gets a 99% Rotten Tomato audience rating.
I heard somewhere that there was nothing political about it. It was just funny, they said.
Oh, politically correct in the sense that he talks about a lot of. I've watched it 2 or 3 times now.
Okay.
He talks about a lot of taboo subjects that a lot of people take exception with and find very offensive. Okay. Like I said, I've seen it 2 or 3 times. The comeback series has been bashed as, quote, hate speech, while other viewers have hailed it as one of the best comedy performances of all time. From their respective paradigms, I'll tell you this, they're both right. From their own respective paradigms. Okay. I see exactly how people who watch this can say that it's, can call it hate speech. I can also see how people who don't give a shit about stuff like that at all, right, and don't get offended that way, think it's funnier and shit. So it's a real, but that's as usual with him as a comedian. He's very controversial that way. His latest hour-long set has received a ridiculously rare 0% from Rotten Tomatoes from 5 professional critics, placing it alongside box office car crashes like Super Babies, Baby Genius 2, and Simon Says. Yeah, right, Troll 2. However, the incredibly low rating soon rose to 17% and then 29% on the film rating site on Tuesday. The very same day, Rotten Tomatoes revealed Chappelle's comedy special had received a polarizing 99% audience score. The audience rating is a collective score from at least 3,750 casual reviewers who rushed to the rating site to praise the comedian for covering controversial topics, which most comics tend to sidestep in a bid to avoid modern cancel culture. It's clear from the astronomical contrast between critics and regular viewers that arguably shows how a huge cultural divide between the public and the media elites who were previously expected to speak on our behalf. Fans also loved how Chappelle lambasted both sides of America's political divide, taking a hysterical jab at the state of the country's current affairs.
Elites.
What did I say? Elites for?
Okay, I don't... Is that what?
That's exactly what it is.
Okay,
elites,
I was saying, what?
I just totally got tripped up on that word. The public and the media elites who were previously expected to speak on our behalf. Yeah, I've seen it multiple times. It is hilarious. And he even goes in on like the public. Like he doesn't. It's. But I like that kind of shit, so I don't find offense to it. My interpretation is that 99% rating makes perfect sense to people that have who like comedy and like that kind of to be, it should be controversial. Sure, like some people like that as an art form. I'm one of them. I like for things to kind of have an edge to them. Scientists make the first nickel oxide material that shows superconductivity.
Oh,
this is from No Ridge. At Stanford University. Made with Jenga chemistry, the discovery could help crack the mystery of how high-temperature superconductors work. Scientists at the Departments of Energy, SLAC, National Accelerator Laboratory, and Stanford University have made the first nickel oxide material that shows clear signs of superconductivity, the ability to transmit electricity and current with no loss.
Nickelate?
Nickel metal oxide.
No, it's also known as nickelate. It's like the big bold word.
Also known as nickelate, it's the first in a potential of a new family of unconventional superconductors that's very similar to the copper oxides or copperates. The discovery in 1986 raised hopes that superconductors could someday operate at close to room temperature and revolutionize electronic devices, power transmission, and other technologies. Those similarities have scientists wondering if nickelates could also superconduct at relatively high temperatures. At the same time, the new material seems different from the cuprates in a fundamental ways. For instance, it may not contain a type of magnesium that all superconducting cuprates have, and this could overturn leading theories of how these unconventional superconductors work. After more than 3 decades of research, no one has pinned that down. The experiments were led by a bunch of people whose names I can't pronounce at places like laboratories and shit. Quote, this is a very important discovery that requires us to rethink the details of the electronic structure and possible mechanisms of superconductivity in these materials, said George Sawatsky. Sawatsky, a professor of physics and chemistry at the University of British Columbia who was not involved in the study but wrote a commentary that accompanied the paper in Nature. Quote, this is going to cause an awful lot of people to jump into investigating this new class of materials, and all sorts of experimental and theoretical work will be done. So the cool thing about this is the thing to keep in mind is every time you have an electronic device that gets hot, what you're actually seeing is the inefficiency of the material. That energy is wasted. It does not make that electronic device.
Just heating it up.
It just makes it hot and it dissipates into the atmosphere. So if you have superconductors, that goes away. So the relative power that devices need to work goes down dramatically.
You don't need vents. Things won't overheat as often unless you have them in direct sunlight, maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean, it won't overheat from functionality.
Yeah, no.
And you can shove a shitload more power through a much smaller wire.
Yeah.
Well, technically infinitely more power through a smaller wire. So that makes the cost of delivery of power and all that stuff start to go down remarkably.
Nice.
So it's very important. Science, engineers.
They're the people. That's the shit.
Do you want to talk about space junk disasters?
Well, yeah.
Facebook, there's all kinds of shit going on with Facebook. They're doing facial recognition too, more science stuff. Crystalline nets harvest water from desert air.
We talked about that.
We talked about this is a whole different solar technology.
but we did mention the ones from the air. Yeah,
big benefit to being left-handed confirmed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm left-handed, so
okay, then maybe we should do this.
A new study has found that lefties' brains. Oh, who's this from? The Guardian. Lefties' brains could be associated with better verbal skills, among other talents. And the author says, I always knew I was special. Me too. Huh. Being a lefty has a genetic component. It's linked to better verbal skills, and it's associated with a lower risk of Parkinson's disease, according to a new study published in the journal Brain. Unfortunately for Guardian readers, that's lefty in the hardness sense, not political. Fortunately for me, I'm both. The study is a fascinating one, using thousands of brain scans and hundreds of thousands of sequenced genomes to look for associations between genes, brains, and hands. It found that in left-handers, the left and right hemispheres had stronger links in the regions associated with language, which could correlate with greater language ability.
Genes, brains, and hands. Genes, brains, and hands.
It also found significant positive correlation between left-handedness and mental health outcomes, such as sensitivity.
Well,
you've hurt me. Having fed-up feelings. Fuck off. And being a worrier. Oh, Eric, it's all going to end soon.
Oh, shit.
Look, I'm no scientist, but that feels extremely real. I don't agree with that. Left-handedness runs in families, and identical twins are more likely to have the same hand dominant than are fraternal twins and siblings. This implies that the genes do have some influence, but are not the whole story. Previous studies have suggested left-handedness is about 25% heritable, with the other 75% of the variation accounted for by environmental factors, although what those factors are remains elusive. So this article basically isn't telling us.
They're not. It's
anything.
not. It doesn't know. Does
This
it?
is basically a left-handed person going, I'm special. Fuck.
And then something that looks completely different down there. Since you're here,
Eric, the big words giveth.
The little words in this case kind of confused me, but they definitely took us away.
Boo, Guardian. Boo. Oh, we're back to that.
And
shit.
back to the Nuremberg wood carving, which we actually had a better conversation about than
I think
that.
we did. Yeah, absolutely. That is an hour and a half of podcasting brilliance recorded again in the No Shitcast studio.
In the bunkers.
In the bunker, as it were, hiding under mountains of a mountain of sandstone and regret. Got anything you want to add tonight, Bubba?
Sandstones and ex-wives. Add to? I did earlier, but I can't remember what it was now.
Damn it! Again, I stumped you.
Yeah,
I even tried to forewarn you a little this time, like we put some
that's all right.
verbal lubrication in there, as it were, to give you time to think about it. All right, thanks for listening, everyone. Check us out at www.noshitcast.com. It's KNOWSHITCAST.com. Make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons. Leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Give us a rating on iTunes, etc. We would really love it if you do that. And if you like what we do, give us a share. It'd be greatly appreciated. We'll catch you all next time. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.